Thank you very much for inviting me to speak alongside these much better informed experts in the field. I'm here from the British Library really to reassure you that everything that you've all been working on and contributing to as part of this project has a permanent home for the future at the British Library. Within this building, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, and your collection, your interviews will sit alongside 625 kilometres of books and items growing at 12 kilometres a year. 6 million people look up catalogue entries at the British Library every year, and we're currently running about 1.2 million users of the British Library's oral history collections, of which my team are responsible. So I wanted to reassure you that the stuff is safe, it's accessible, and if it makes you feel even better, it's alongside the Magna Carta, the Mandela recordings from the Rivonia trial, and millions of other recordings. And in fact, the British Library looks after 6 million items of sound from the very origins of recorded sound. As you probably know, Thomas Edison invented recorded sound in 1877. So all the technology that we've used to record the stories for this project really grew out of those early developments, and we have something over 40 formats of sound at the British Library. And one of the oldest, interestingly, for this audience is Florence Nightingale. It's rather scratchy and difficult to hear, but Florence Nightingale exists, her original voice exists from 1890, and you can access it through the BL Sound Archive. So this collection sits along those 6 million items, and we're in the middle at the moment of a huge digitisation project to make many more of these accessible through the British Library's website. And the BL's oral history collections themselves, within that 6 million, are amongst the largest in the world, so you're in very good company. Something over 500 collections generated broadly since the Second World War, 35,000 interviews. We're adding something over 100 hours of new recordings every month through lots of fieldwork projects we do, and through working through partners like this project. And it's worth adding that your interviews actually sit alongside a lot of other material that we have in the oral history collections relating to the story of HIV and AIDS, which we've gathered over the last 25 years, including 2 projects which Sian and other people in the room were involved in generating related to haemophilia and HIV. There's a fantastic website there which you can look at. Now, I was asked to say just a few words about what oral history is, what its origins are, which could take me a rather long time. So I'm just going to say a few words, which is to the effect that although oral history is a phrase which many of you are familiar with, you're perhaps less familiar with the fact that we think of it really as both the oldest and the newest form of history. A lot of historians think of it as a post-war development, but I would argue that Herodotus was the first oral historian. He wasn't using tape recorders, but he was valuing personal testimony, really forefronting eyewitness testimony, as was the Venerable Bede, and the British Library has the papers and documents and manuscripts of the Venerable Bede. So when I say to my medieval colleagues, you're collecting oral history material, they see it slightly differently. But the important point to make is that oral history, of course, and how we listen to each other, how we hear each other's stories, how we value those stories and memories, is very deeply embedded within our culture and within our communities. And what the modern movement of oral history has done over the last 50 years is really to bring that methodology into the modern era, and it's now valued across many areas of academic study, sociology, media and cultural studies, and so on. So why is it that we chose this methodology for this project? Well, as you've already heard, one of the things that official data and records don't give you is personal stories, particularly the stories from those that aren't documented in official records. So oral history has always taken quite a radical stance of retrieving personal memory where it doesn't exist in traditional records, where it's been deleted from official records, and particularly, as we'll hear later, documents the everyday details of everyday lives, how people do things, how they feel about how they do things, their role within larger systems and structures like the NHS. And what it seeks to do, oral history, is to gather those direct personal historical evidence and give it a place in the archive so that it sits alongside those official records as a counterbalance, as a juxtaposition to the documents that we have. But I think it does something broader, and I know Jane and Nikki will talk about this, which is the role of particular events, and in this case an epidemic, within the broader social context of individual lives. So one thing that happened in an individual life is better understood by understanding and by recording that whole life. And this is, I think, why we chose oral history for this particular project. So it's all safe in the British Library. We'll be providing full online access to it over the next few years. There's clips on a fantastic website that you already know about. The original files are safely stored in our library's digital library system. And of course then we need to begin to think about who's going to access this material through the library. And primarily we're hoping that it's people within government, policy advisors, and I think a very good vindication of the earlier work that we did with the haemophilia community was that the Infected Blood Inquiry is at this very moment accessing the oral history interviews that we did some 10 years ago with those haemophiliacs that had contracted HIV and AIDS but have sadly died. So their voices are present at the Infected Blood Inquiry, and in fact this week one of the relatives actually played some clips from one of those interviews as part of the inquiry to bring the voice of that deceased individual to the inquiry. So you can see that it's not just history here, but it's policy, it's having an impact on the way we think and do things and go forward. So it has a very important role. Also within the NHS, as we're going to hear, amongst educators, we've done previous work using extracts from the archive in HIV nurse training, and of course for lots of historians. And most of all, perhaps for you and us to keep a permanent record of that particular period of history. So, enough from me, just a few thanks. No one yet has thanked the National Lottery Heritage Fund. I'm sure you were going to do that in a moment, but I want to thank them because they have supported over the last 25 years a fantastic array of oral history projects of all kinds, including some of the ones I mentioned earlier around haemophilia. They've been a real support for all the work that we're doing in oral history, and we should thank them. It's been great working with you guys. It's been fun as we've gone along. It's been moving. We need to thank all the interviewees here in the room for giving your time. And last of all, thank you for involving us. It's been a huge privilege. So thank you very much.